Okay, guys, welcome to Skepdicks. This is just a podcast about three fairly unintelligent guys talking about fringe stuff and where it sits with them and who believes and who doesn't. Spoiler alert, I believe in a lot of things. Josh believes in very few things. Tom is pretty fluid. So, yeah.
I don't believe, but I
Okay.
think I could be convinced. That's
Okay.
where I'm at.
Okay.
I
He's fluid.
believe I'm fairly intelligent, so
Oh, okay. Well,
that
we
topic
do
has
have a
been
difference of
hotly.
opinion there as well.
I was going to say that has been hotly debated in many circles. So
Cool. So today this is our first episode. We wanted to talk about a fairly ubiquitous one, and we chose Atlantis. Talking about Atlantis here. So I think, as Tom suggested, why don't we just start with where we're all at with it? Me, I think Atlantis as a concept represents a real historical thing, like 100%.
Okay. I've done a couple hours of research, and that was Atlantis 1 and Atlantis 2, Milo's Return. And I did watch the newest Aquaman. So,
Nice.
um,
Nice. Okay.
I don't know. I've learned a little bit about Atlantis. Is Little
Pretty
Mermaid
informed.
set in Atlantis?
it sure is.
Okay.
Josh,
So I'm
Are you
pushing
talking
into
about?
7
Are
or 8
you,
hours of research.
are you referring to the biography on a young mermaid's journey?
Josh, did he mention those to you before, or were you just spitballing and he did exactly what you said he was going to do?
No, I've been knowing Tom for about 25 years, so I knew what was about to come out of his mouth.
Yeah. Pretty predictable, huh?
We did not talk about it at all.
You should have heard
prior
him,
to the
Tom.
call, I said Tom's going to get on here and talk about the Disney biographies on Atlantis,
Yeah.
and Little Mermaid.
I think I gave it away in the text thread where I was like, let's do what we know, because I think you guys knew that that's what I know.
Fair enough. Josh, what do you got?
I actually, interestingly enough, agree with you. Oh, I agree in the possibility of Atlantis being real, and that's just from other stuff that I've heard and a little bit of research. So
Cool.
And
Cool.
and I think with all the things that we could be skeptical about, I think Atlantis is probably like, on the more real side,
Sure.
of the spectrum. It definitely seems more feasible than Bigfoot or, at least to me.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that's like so far deep in history that it's hard to refute anything about like before 10,000 years ago. We just don't know. But
yeah, that's the thing that's interesting about this one is it actually doesn't seem like supernatural. It's just did this place exist or not, and everything that I've seen about it doesn't. They're not claiming to have had floating or flying cars or anything crazy like that. It just is
Right.
kind of an advanced civilization for the time.
Yep,
So
totally.
so when we say Atlantis, are we saying that we believe that a city fell off the face of the earth into the ocean and that's it? Or are we saying that you think that there's like a whole like world down there still? Like people are still running around?
I
Is
see.
that what you're saying?
I guess honestly we can talk about whichever aspects of it you want, but I think there's only a real discussion to be had about the idea of a historical Atlantis that was a city above the water.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did we want to start off with what we know?
Oh, that's right.
Currently,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Let's do that. Who wants
So
to start?
Tom, outside of the your couple hours of research, what do you know about Atlantis?
I think I just remember something about it being an advanced city, like what you guys were just saying. That just was by the sea and stuff that happened where it basically just sunk, or I don't know if it was you know before like Pangea, before everything separated or things started separating and then it fell in. I don't know. I have no idea, like in the concept of or in the scale of time, like when people say it happened, I have nothing.
Okay.
Okay. Well, Cole's obviously got the most, so we're gonna allow him to talk last, I think. Um, so for me, I know the concept of Atlantis. I think was first talked about from Plato. He talked about that. That was like 300 BC, um, and that he didn't have a firsthand account of it. It was actually from an ancestor of his that talked to Egyptians who they're the ones that are like, "Hey, you idiot." To I don't know what his ancestor's name, but it was like an ancestor that Plato had never met or anything, but way before him. And the Egyptians were like, "Yeah, there's been civilizations that you guys don't know about for a long time." Um, and what I understood from that is that the time frame in Plato's account of it, because Plato, the way he wrote everything was in conversation, so it's
Mm-hmm.
I forget the name that it is, but it's Plato was describing this conversation, and that's how he kind of put out facts. And he always used situations to describe things, but more
Mm-hmm.
philosophically or like societal, you know, issues. But
Mm-hmm.
in this one, he says like, no, this actually happened, right? He kind of like calls out like, hey, this is true. And he described a city of that was advanced for the time and had these aspects of, that not every all cities do.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like a I don't know if he described this or if it's something else I've just read about Atlantis, that it's just like a an advanced city of commerce where people come and there's a lot of trade going on there.
Yep.
And then um, fast forward far beyond that, the description he gave was basically like, here's where you can start, and halfway between here and there is where it is, and then if you keep going past that, there's another landmass there. And when I was looking at that, I found out that there was a place that's where like three tectonic plates meet, right? So if a city is gonna fall into the ocean, that's a great place for it. And then if you look at the floor of those tectonic plates, um, there's like markings to show that there's been a lot of shit going on there, right?
Yep.
And what was described, when I was looking through that, is that those markings could be the case for an ice cap that had melted and throwing a ton of fresh water into the ocean at the time, and then caused that friction. Instead of like tectonic plates are typically moving horizontally, they were then moving vertically. Um, and then the other thing that I knew about from a podcast I saw with Joe Rogan is I think it was Randall Carlson, and he was talking about a place called the Eye of Africa. I forget what the actual name is, but
Mm-hmm.
this is a place that looks like what the description of Atlantis was from Plato. So it had like three concentric circles of what would be the city. It also shows like an area that would be perfect for where ships would have been coming in and out. And then there's also archaeologically like a lot of evidence for something who have been there. There's like
Mm-hmm.
whale bones, right, that haven't turned into stone to be fossils yet.
Yeah.
They're just bones, and it's giant whales that could have been there. Um, and there's a lot of evidence for it there. That's that's like at the top of Africa, and then the
Mm-hmm.
other place I was talking about was like in the middle of the Atlantic, and so I don't know which one or have any reason to believe one way or the other, except for the one that was in the Atlantic. When they did some like dredging and they got soil from there, they found out that one, it was soil that was created above air, so it at one point was above water, or not above air, above water,
Right.
in the air that it was created. And there was a beach down there that would have only been a beach based on it, being in very shallow water at
Mm-hmm.
some.
Yeah.
Those are the two things. Oh, and then for the eye of where that is, I forget where it is, but it's along a mountain range
Mm-hmm.
that is the Atlas Mountains, and it's
Yep.
named for a king that was the king of that area, right? and
Mm-hmm.
that king,
Triton.
no, King Atlas actually, which from from I think like a Greek mythology, all of Poseidon's sons were named Atlas, or he sent 10 of them out or something to be the king of different places.
Yeah.
And Atlantis is actually a city and a civilization. So they were saying that there's actually 10 different cities that are all part of Atlantis.
Yeah.
All right,
Totally.
that's
You
everything I know.
you hit a lot of the really good stuff that I think a lot of the points that I think are like the only reasons there is any merit in having a conversation about it. Um,
All that
so
being said, though, I don't believe in any of this, Cole. Now, you're gonna have some convincing to do.
sit
I,
back.
I think the main thing that was accomplished, Josh, with what you said is that I think you are smart. I think you're the smart one.
I'm still skeptical.
Well,
So yeah, just to clarify a couple of those points. Um, so I think that Solon, the guy who had recorded this account from an Egyptian priest about what he
that's
called
Plato's
Nesos
ancestor, right?
Atlantis, right? I I think he gets incorrectly referred to as an ancestor of Plato. I think I'm gonna look this up, but I think he's actually
Oh,
an ancestor of Critias.
let me add one more bit that I found interesting. I don't know the guy's name. There was
Mm-hmm.
another Greek that was in between Solon and Plato that was like known for making maps and being really good at making
Oh,
maps.
okay.
And he made a map that had Atlantis in the place where the Eye of Africa is.
Right, right. Okay. Excuse
So
me.
that was another thing that I was like, oh shit, there's another, because it's interesting to have these things that are completely separate of the what I would describe as like scientifically factual. Like
Right.
it's factual that there is sand and dirt at this place in the Atlantic. It's factual that there's concentric circles in this place, but when you line that up to something where these people, Plato and whoever this other map maker guy was,
Mm-hmm.
they they wouldn't have had the ability to kind of predict that. So lining
Right.
those two things up is very interesting to me. But go ahead,
Totally.
sorry.
No, no worries. I think that Solon was actually the ancestor of Critias, who is one of the people involved in this dialogue that Plato is writing about, where he unfolds the story of Atlantis.
Okay.
And just to comment on the dialogues real quick, it's kind of like the accepted idea that Plato wrote a bunch of dialogues as, like you said, formats for just like expounding on certain ideas, just putting things out there. There are some people who think that he, in each of these cases, was actually just sitting down recording a dialogue that happened because Socrates liked to host these philosophical and high concept dialogues, like just like this like open forum between a few people, and that these are basically just transcriptions. And I I could see either being the case. I could also see it having been like that he wrote down, transcribed a few of these actual dialogues that happened, and then was like, you know what, these are great characters, and this is a great idea. I can start putting out other ideas with this same vehicle. So easily both could be true. But that is the basis for people saying that Plato made the story of Atlantis up as a cautionary tale, is because these dialogues are almost unanimously considered fictional, that they're not actual accounts. They are all things that he's writing to try to teach with. May or may not have been the case. Real quick, I'm just going to verify that about Solon, that he was not.
There was another guy, right? It's like two different portions that.
Yeah, Timaeus and Critias. Um,
Josh, did you actually like do some research beforehand of this? Like,
I did research on this, so it's no secret I'm very atheist. So another thing I don't believe in. Uh, but when Randall Carlson came on Joe Rogan, that's when there's the Younger Dryas theory, which is the theory of like comets hitting the North America, and melting all of these ice caps that were there, right? And that led into this other part. And then yeah, some of this is just research, but I just watched one video of this of or from that thing. Randall Carlson talks about a girl who does a summary of his work on that, and I watched that, and she talks about Atlantis.
Yeah, you watch and listen to a lot of the same people that I like to in regard to those things. I can't.
Johanna James, I think.
Yeah, Johanna James or
Yeah,
Johanna James. I think it's like JAH.
Yeah.
Um,
So far, you guys are making me look pretty stupid.
Sit back and watch. I wasn't able to confirm very quickly, like who Solon was the ancestor of, so don't stake anything on me saying it's one of the characters.
And if you
ancestor.
are watching this, don't stake anything on anything said during this podcast.
So the point is, this guy named Solon is purported to have brought this story of a place that he called Nesos Atlantis, which just means Atlas's island, to Greece, and that theoretically the story was handed down, and that's why Plato knew of it to either insert into a dialogue, or Timaeus and Critias knew of it to bring up in an actual dialogue that was then recorded. Either way, the idea is that it came from an actual account that was recorded around 600 BC. Now, let's talk about the two locations that you mentioned and kind of like dive into what is satisfying about those ideas and like what may not work. Off the top, I love the area you're talking about in the Atlantic Ocean, which the Azores Islands are basically, the peaks of this formation that's mostly submerged, the Azores Plateau. And like you stated, it sits right at this like three-way intersection of continental divides. And so it has it's very faulty. It has
covered in fault lines, Tom.
Yes. It has an interesting like kind of tricorn shape, which plays very well into the Timaeus and Critias accounts of Atlantis, because one of the things they mention is that so to reiterate some of the mythology you mentioned, Poseidon had 5 sets of twins, right? Sons with some human lady that lived on this island, and he put this sequence of concentric circles with an estate in the middle for her to live there and be safe or whatever. And Atlas was one of these twin sons who was kind of like the most important among them. And as you stated, he was given his kingdom or his city, his rule. He was like the king of kings, but his like place was in the city of Atlantis. And that account says that the city of Atlantis was on the point of a cape that faces modern day, I don't remember the name of it, someplace in Spain. And as it happens, the Azores Plateau, if the whole thing were above water, that tricorn shape, like one of those capes just points exactly to this place in Spain. And it's like, okay, that's kind of silliness to not at least consider that might be worth looking into. Now, the problems with...
So let me understand. So in what you just said, it would be that isn't Atlantis. That is a place where this lady had babies with Poseidon, and then sent.
It's all out on this in the account. It's all on the same island, like the same continent, because Atlantis is referred to as a continent that's the size of Anatolia and Libya put together. And if you take that submerged plateau, it probably doesn't.
Another thing I know, just because I'm just trying to get it all out there, so that
Yeah.
connect the
Do
dots for me,
please.
is that the Eye of Africa? I know that there's another name for it.
The Richat.
Yeah, that it has the same diameter of a stadia, which is I forget. I think Plato referred to it being a stadia or something, and the only reason that makes sense to me is because that is where the word stadium came from, and
Right.
stadium comes from Greeks. So
Yeah.
I remember that as well. It also lines up exactly with the diameter of what he described as Atlantis too.
So there is some trouble with that. It doesn't. But I know that Jimmy Corsetti, who has done more to put the discussion of the Richat structure into this this circle, he's done more to highlight that than like anyone else has, and he's brought a lot of good stuff to the table. And I think I remember seeing one of his videos where he mentioned that some of the measurements line up or whatever, and then you see the measure. He took a screenshot of his Google Earthing, and you see the measurement he has lined up, and it's not the same. And it wouldn't be the first flub he's made. He often like will put screenshots of text on the screen and like read them and like read something wrong and then base his following argument on something that he read incorrectly. He's a smart guy and he is an interesting guy. But like there are occasional little things like that. I've measured out the stuff myself, and unfortunately it doesn't line up, but that's not a huge problem. There are reasons to forgive that we can get into. Now, back on the plateau, one of the problems with it is that at the height of the last ice age, the sea levels were only 400 feet lower, and that doesn't even come close to unburying the Azores plateau. But like you mentioned, there is every possibility for the seafloor in that area, especially, at that tri-point of faults, for it to be very spongy. And so as all this fresh water was added to the oceans with the sudden melting of glaciers, it would have added a ton of weight and probably depressed the seafloor a little bit. So if you turn time back, take off 400 feet for just the actual water level, and take the weight off of that part of the seafloor, there is a possibility that it rebounds and comes above the water. And I think it's about a mile deep or something like that. So it's pretty dang deep. Maybe it's not that deep, but it's much deeper than 400 feet. Or is it 400 meters? I think it's 400 meters that the sea levels rose since the height of the ice age. I don't remember. Either way, point is, it's too far underwater for that to account for it, but it very likely does depress under the weight and rebound when it's relieved. So, like, it's a realistic idea that could have been above water. And if above water, it does match a lot of the physical descriptions given in the Timaeus and Critias dialogues. Before I move on from that, anything we want to pick into? Or
one thing I also remember what you're talking about, that because I remember the timeline. That was another thing that kind of Plato had lined out in that,
totally,
of how long before that was, because I think it was like 9,600 years before, and that's when they were saying that this happened. And then when they do an analysis after the dredging in that area, they saw that the continental Earth or whatever it was would have been formed prior to that. So
okay,
and it so he also got, right around when that kind of lines up scientifically with that being true too.
Totally. Yeah, and the aside from the soil that's like in that area of the ocean floor, It is just a fact that we started to have pretty quick sea level rises from that time period, like around the globe, moving forward. Which that time period that he references is roughly 11,600 years before today, so like 9,600 BC. And that's one of those things that's like, it's fun and easy to ignore stuff if you're a boring person, but that's just like kind of too good to not look into. Kind of like the shape of the plateau itself. And it doesn't even begin to end there. All the interesting stuff.
I hope they make a rock movie out of it though, because it was like the San Andreas movie and all these other, The Day After Tomorrow. And it's like, yeah, that's all that, but like, can you imagine if they made a rock movie where he's in Atlantis and he's King Atlas, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey, the city's sinking, and then a freaking huge wave of water. It's like, oh, that's a cool story.
Wasn't the Rock an amputee in that movie too?
He was. Oh no, that was Skyscraper. Is that what it's called? The one that's basically Die Hard.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that movie was fun.
Someone told me about a Die Hard with The Rock. I would have watched that.
It's actually quite fun.
You should have pitched in. That should have been part of their trailer. Do you like Die Hard? Do you like bald men with muscle?
Do you like not thinking for an hour and a half? I wonder if in 12,000 years, if like three nerds are going to have a debate or a podcast about like wondering if Miami was actually real.
For real, man. That place is going bye-bye.
Were there really Latin women dancing every night?
Yeah. They have very exaggerated... It's like the woman from Willendorf. These women, just that you wouldn't believe their hips.
Oh, man. Okay, I think the next interesting thing that deserves some discussion is Atlas, and the Atlas Mountains and all of that jazz. So what is it? Is it Greek? It's Greek, right? The god Atlas. The god Atlas is there's just like a lot of ambiguity as to like who was the first Atlas and where it all comes from and whatnot, and whether it has a shared origin, different origins. But like Plato's Timaeus and Critias dialogues claim that Atlas was a son of Poseidon, king of kings of Atlantis. Separately, there is a Greek myth about a god named Atlas who, because of whatever in the heck, I don't remember what his crime was, he's sent to the western edge of the world to bear up the heavens on his shoulders. It seems to me like they have to all be the same thing. And this is what I think. I think that the reason Atlas, the Greek figure, exists is because of... Oh, sorry, yeah. And the third thing is the Atlas mountain range in northern Africa. I think Atlas, the Greek god, exists as an idea because of the Atlas mountain range. Because they're on the western edge of the Mediterranean. They're like at the western edge of the world for all intents and purposes. And there's this big, tall mountain range that's bearing up the skies. And it makes sense for them to have, taken the mountains or whoever they were named after, and to say that like that was, and build up this whole myth around it that was placed there to support the heavens because this and this happened. So I think that the myth of the god comes from the fact that this mountain range is sitting over there holding up the skies in the western part of the world. I think that the mountain range is named Atlas, probably, and I'm going to go into my fringy stuff. I think that there was a society that had, a name similar to Atlas, Atlantis, whatever, is named after probably a king. So, as they called it, the Isle of Atlas, like this might have just been a whole, civilization that thrived and kind of took on the name of an early high king named Atlas or whatever. So if these are the people of Atlas, if they were struck with cataclysm and they found themselves on the shores of northern Africa and they sought high ground in the Atlas Mountains, they probably just named it Atlas after, their god king or after the civilization that they lost after their people. So I think the Atlas Mountain name comes from whatever came before the cataclysm that's spoken of, and I think that the god Atlas comes from the mountain range. So I don't think they're different things at all.
Okay. So with those two places being two completely different,
Yeah.
can you connect the dots on do people argue about which one was actually Atlantis or where actual Atlantis would be, or is there any kind of like you said earlier where maybe the first one is where that city could be and then sent out to create another one, or I don't understand that
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, so I think that it can kind of take any shape. The fact that there are these two different places that have very good connections to the account that Plato gives. This is how I kind of think of it, though. The concentric circles thing in Mauritania in the Richat structure, that is too good to ignore as well, but for other reasons than just that there are concentric circles. We'll get into those reasons. But that one's too good to ignore. And the Atlas Plateau is too good to ignore. And so, looks like we've got 15 minutes on this call, so we'll start up another one if we don't get somewhere we like, or we can part one, part two it.
Yeah, we might have to do that because I have a babysitter showing up at
Cool.
5:15.
Cool. So, both places, too good to ignore. But, like, the account says that this concentric ringed moated city existed on the island continent that was out in the Atlantic Ocean, and that this represented Atlantis. What's far more likely, in my opinion, is that Atlantis was just a thriving kingdom, empire, whatever. Probably had cities all over northwestern Africa, the Iberian Peninsula. If there was a big landmass in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, maybe that was their operating center, maybe that was the capital. So it's very possible that it is true that there was a capital city on this continent out in the Atlantic Ocean, and that separately it's also true that there was a famed ringed city that also was like a high city of theirs. These could have also both been capitals in different points in time. Like, let's say the civilization existed for 500 years or 1,000 years. Like, who knows? Maybe they come from different time periods. I do think they are both connected to this supposed ancient civilization, and that both of them made their way into kind of a combined reductionist story about this kingdom through oral tradition. Yeah, so I think they're just both part of it, and the idea that they had to be the same thing in the same place is a mistake.
One of the things that I didn't see explained was the one for the Richat structure.
Mm-hmm.
The concentric circle one.
Yeah.
What's the explanation of that? The water being up there, right? Because isn't it like pretty high up? So,
Yeah.
and then I think that the account that like Plato talks about ships going
Mm-hmm.
straight up to the city, right? So
Yeah, totally.
when was the water there?
That I don't know. To my understanding, there actually has not been a very good like hydrological survey of that area because, and this is mostly coming from what Jimmy Corsetti has shared in terms of studies and pictures and maps and stuff. The water that is understood to have been in northern Africa, like the large bodies of water that were connected to the sea, oftentimes they don't, the way they're mapped out currently, like none of those do have an overlay with the Richat structure. And maybe that makes sense. Maybe it's simply that that's right where the water came up to, and that's why basically like the moats were filled by seawater, but like it was seaside, so it itself was above the water. But I don't know. I guess I haven't seen
Maybe I'm misremembering, but I thought I remembered something saying that you could take a ship up to it, then something happened, and then you couldn't take a ship up to it, and that was the explanation for it.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. The idea is that it was, there was kind of a main line that went right into like the central island through all the moats, and it was a trade route. And supposedly when the city sunk, it created a big muddy shoal that blocked passage in that part of the ocean. That's the description that's given in Timaeus and Critias. I think that's in Timaeus. I forget. No, I think that's in Critias. And so supposedly the ocean became impassable where Atlantis formerly was. And, there's plenty of evidence topologically that there was a rush of water that basically skinned what is now the Richat structure and kind of wiped all that earth off into the sea. I think that's been like fairly well studied, and at least in terms of like the earth dump that's in that part of the sea, and it has been very well analyzed photographically by Jimmy Corsetti. Props to that guy. It's pretty obvious that like water did rush over that. So if that place went overnight from being a place you could just pull up into with your ship because it was on the water's edge to all of the sudden it's just a big mess of just muddy earth, and you can't get to it, maybe the fact that it's not in the Atlantic Ocean isn't a problem. Like that aspect of the story can also still be true, like the muddy shoal thing. Although what I'm confusing myself about right now is if the water levels rose, then why would the Richat have gone from being a seaside settlement to, like the water next to it being low? Yeah, maybe that has to do with the depression.
One of the other things I remember, just a tidbit, is that if you go there, which from what I understand, it's extremely remote, and that's why people don't, right? And it's in a country that doesn't have it's not like we have America where, the three of us can be like, all right, let's pack up the Jeep, that if you dig a well in the very center of it, there's fresh water. But if you dig a well outside of the very center, it's salt water. Interesting. And that I saw was being like used as like a evidence for it having been under the ocean at different points.
Okay, I like that, and it definitely has. There are salt deposits from evaporated seawater in that area. So the fact that seawater had been there is like factual. It's just that I don't think it's as well studied as other parts of the Sahara and further north, where we have these maps of like, oh, a million years ago it looked like this, and you have these big seaways and stuff like that. The same depictions don't exactly exist for whatever was there in northwestern Africa, and I just think it's not as well studied. Sorry, Tom, you were about to say something.
No, I just said that was interesting. What you were saying.
Oh, okay.
Which one do you lean towards, Cole? As far as sites.
As far as what?
As far as those two sites, are they equal in your eyes? Do you lean towards one?
I think they're equally strong, and I should tell you why I think the Richat structure is strong. I think the fact that it's a natural geological formation is brilliant because it has the correct number of moats. If you are to look at the salt deposits and whatnot, it has the correct number. And if you can imagine for a second being a person who lived in Greek times and before Greek times, like Greece doesn't exist now, in ancient Greece or before, and let's say you had a belief in a sea god like Poseidon, if you came across this thing that just happened to be so well positioned that, you know, seawater filled the low points in between these rings of land, if you happened upon it at the right point in geologic history to where it looked like that, it would look like something that was planned, something that a god made. And so you create this story about Poseidon creating it for his love as a protective, you know, hilltop estate. So I love the fact that it's a natural formation. That doesn't at all make it smell like not Atlantis to me. I think that's the reason for the mythology. The other thing about it, and I think Jimmy Corsetti pointed this one out too, and I really loved this, because I think he has at different times maybe said that it's the right size and that it's not the right size. Oh, I think I remember what it was when he was like, this measurement lines up with how many stadia Plato describes. I think what it was he was measuring like the wrong thing or something like that. But in essence, it is far bigger than what Plato describes as the footprint of this island and the moats around it. Now, Jimmy pointed out that, I think it was him that pointed out, that if all that area was just skinned by rushing water, which it clearly was, you can see from satellite photography, this is a collapsed dome. That's what has formed these rings. Is basically you have you know, a little hump of dirt and then another one on top of it, another one on top of it, another one on top of it. At some point through some geological process, that all collapses, and maybe it has collapsed a couple times or whatever, but you end up with these, you know, kind of Russian nesting doll shells collapsed down, and you get these concentric rings in a more or less flat surface. If that has all been skinned by rushing water, then you take it back before that, the surface, the Earth's surface up higher would have been, like, the concentric rings would have been smaller, because again, this is probably a collapsed dome. So I don't know if I'm making sense, but that kind of, if you're to cross section it, you're going to get smaller and smaller circles the closer you get to the top of what would have been the dome or the collapsed dome, because it didn't collapse to be totally flat. It just would have collapsed into kind of a bit of a mess, but then it gets completely planed by water. So prior to that happening, the water, you would have had smaller concentric circles near the top, probably would have been closer in size to what was described by Plato.
Well, the call has 4 minutes left. We want to talk about like where we're at with it.
Yeah, sorry, I've been doing most of the talking, so I'll shut up now.
Tom, you want to talk about give us your view on it from The Little Mermaid and
2-minute synopsis of Disney's Atlantis. Go.
Okay, it's been a while. I need to watch the movie again for sure, especially with kids. Or Laura would probably love it now. No, like I think I came into it thinking like that of all the things we talked about doing episodes on, I think Atlantis seems the most feasible, because it just seems like I don't know, it just seems more realistic. The idea of everything that happened. I don't think that it's like Atlantis the movie with like
right.
with like different like characters who have evolved and like there's like monsters and stuff. Yeah, I don't think that. But I think I came in with it being plausible, and I think I leave with it being just as plausible. I feel like I learned a lot from you guys.
Can I present real quick to
Totally.
show the Richat
Yeah.
structure?
Take it over.
I've taken notes as
Oh,
you've
sick.
talked stuff for me to look at. So I looked up the Jimmy Corsetti.
Sweet.
This is the Richat structure, Tom.
Yeah, buddy.
And so that's why it's like, holy shit, like that's weird, right? Like if you zoom out of that, and that's kind of why they call it the Eye of Africa. It's like there's nothing really, and then like Cole was talking about that mass of water, but holy shit, it kind of looks like something flowing, right? Like we've all kind of played with water and the sand. That definitely looks like that's what's happening here.
Totally.
In my mind, I was thinking this was a lot closer to the water.
Yeah, that's the part that's weird, right?
Yeah.
Is it's way that's what Cole was talking about, where it's like, I mean, that's how far is that, Cole? The 200 kilometers is right here, so that 800 kilometers away from the water now.
Yeah.
And I think it's something. Does Google Earth tell you like what the altitude of a place is? I don't know.
I think it does.
Like here is.
Jeez, that's crazy.
I don't see where it does, but it also, I remember seeing it. It's like over 1,000 feet above sea level, current sea level, which is supposed to have been higher now than it was then.
The thing that we were talking about with the seafloor depressing, I was listening to Randall Carlson on this, and I guess what that's referred to is isostatic depression. And in a situation where that happens, he and others think that it's likely that wherever you depress the Earth's crust, you're imbalancing it, and so it's pushing up elsewhere, like the surface of like an inflated object, right? You push down and it inflates somewhere else. So it's, I suppose, possible in the case of the Richat that if the Atlantic Ocean floor were depressed significantly under the weight of the seawater, thus accounting for how much more than 400 meters or whatever it sank, that could have also kind of rebounded the land mass of Africa up from where it was. So even though the water itself rose, the land might have risen more. So I don't know. That's a possible thing about the Richat and why it's above water now, all these years later.
I like that. That guy I was talking about, the Greek who drew the map.
Yeah.
Let me.
I think I know what you're talking about, and I have a thought about this as well.
Can you? Oh shit! I shared the wrong one. I don't know how to make this big.
You share the wrong one, and it's just like pictures of you like posing on a bed. Like, oh, this is not what I was supposed to put.
Can you guys see this?
Yeah.
So this is the map he drew, and this is like Italy right here that you can see, and this is that northwestern portion of Africa, and then right there.
Yeah. So I do remember seeing that. I think I also saw this on Jimmy's channel, and I think that is also just using Atlantis as the adjectival form of the name Atlas. So I think that is referring to the Atlas Mountains right there and saying Atlas's mountains.
Gotcha.
I think that's what that is. It is compelling though. And the fact that like that doesn't make it any less legit, because honestly, I think the reason those mountains are named after Atlas is because there was some truth to this idea of an important guy and civilization with the name of Atlas that existed, in time before time. It just seems to work.
Yeah. I like the way you tie that together. Okay. Well, part 2.
Yeah, I think we do a part 2. And I do have some quack stuff that I dig about it that I would love to bring up in the part 2.
Stuff?
The stuff.
This felt like more of just like a fun conversation for us.
Totally. Yeah.
Versus like the original idea for this.
Yeah.
I can't wait until you show me some half shit
Mm-hmm.
picture of Bigfoot that I'm like, well, I can see a zipper, Cole. So,
you're gonna
Yeah.
get some of
Yeah.
that with part 2 of Atlantis.
oh, cool. Okay, I look forward to that then.
Yeah. In the time between episodes, I'll brush up on Atlantis 1,
Sick.
Atlantis 2. I'll watch the new version of Little Mermaid.
Good.
I would love if in the next one, since this is recorded, Tom gave us an account from those 3 Disney movies. Just like, okay, brushed up on what I know. And gave just a minute, like a 90-second review of those movies.
I make a whole PowerPoint of the plot.
Please do.
Or
That'd be good.
it's like the the from Always Sunny in Philadelphia with Charlie with like the strings,
Yeah.
But at the center of it is just freaking like Michael J. Fox, as Milo.
Oh my god.
Oh man. Yeah, man. Okay, I'm excited to do this again.
Moreover,
guys-
I mean, more excited that I got to spend an hour with you guys, and I never do. So
that was a blast.
And for anyone who made it to the end, congratulations! Thank you for being a friend, a true friend. I don't even think my wife will listen to this. I mean, if I had to get anybody to listen to it, it'd be you two. I don't know who
Good
else
point.
I'm gonna get to listen. So,
Jen asked if she could listen, but I
there's no way she makes it this far.
there's no way she makes it this far, and I think she's in danger of not becoming my wife. We're engaged. If she does, so
I love it. Maddie will watch it, so we'll have one.
well, Maddie, if you made it this far, you're too good for Cole. You got too much time on your hands.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, if you made it this far, like it was really cool that you were with Cole for a while. Like, we totally get your reason for leaving him.
yeah. Actually, if you made it this far, you probably don't have that much going on, and it makes more sense why you're with Cole. And good job.
Whew. Rough. It's rough out there.
It's okay. At least she's listening, Cole.
At least there's that. Oh,
Yeah,
I forgot, guys. I got to jump off right now.
Oh, all right.
Sorry about that.
See you guys.
Okay. All right.
All right. Peace.
Atlantis. See ya.
Part 2 coming up.